The colony on Zyron 7 had always been quiet, even lonely, nestled on the edge of a dying desert where the winds howled like restless spirits. Life here was hard, and everyone kept to themselves, focused on survival. Yet, today, the usual silence was broken by something that made even the toughest colonists pause. In the corner of a dusty repair bay, a small figure moved slowly, her green-scaled skin shimmering faintly under the flickering lights. She was an alien, a dragon girl no taller than a human child, her eyes wide with a mix of grief and fear. She carried a small bundle, carefully wrapped, and her wings trembled, brushing the walls with a soft hiss that echoed through the empty space. She approached the human mechanic who worked tirelessly among broken engines and leaking oil pipes, his hands greasy but precise. The mechanic Rylan had seen many unusual things in his years, but nothing had prepared him for this. The girl stopped in front of him and lowered her head. "Please, bury my brother," she whispered, her voice quivering like a fragile note of music. Rylan froze mid-motion, the wrench in his hand hovering in the air. He had heard rumors about orphaned alien families, about tragic accidents caused by rogue mining drones or collapsing structures, but he had never seen one of the little survivors in person. The intensity of her gaze, full of pleading and sorrow, pierced through him. For a moment, the entire repair bay felt smaller, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Other colonists passed by, glancing curiously at the scene, but none dared to intervene. They whispered among themselves. "That's the last of her kind," one muttered. "They say her brother was gone in an accident." The word accident floated in the air, heavy and hollow, yet no one seemed to truly understand the weight behind it. The girl's eyes darted nervously around, as if afraid someone would take the precious bundle she carried from her arms. Her wings folded tightly against her back, tiny claws clutching the bundle as though her very life depended on it. She knelt, lowering the bundle onto the cold, metal floor with trembling hands. "Please," she repeated, louder this time, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Rylan swallowed hard. He was not a sentimental man. He was practical, a fixer of machines, a man who preferred gears to feelings. Yet, something in the girl's plea made him step closer. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her, and peered at the bundle. Inside, he saw the small, lifeless body of another dragon child, pale and still, as if sleep had claimed him forever. Rylan's heart thumped in a way that felt foreign, a pang of empathy he had long buried beneath oil stains and mechanical parts. He had never been asked to deal with death in such a raw, intimate way, and the silence in the bay pressed down on him like a heavy weight. The other workers had stopped moving, drawn in by the quiet desperation that hung in the air. What do you want me to do?" Rylan asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl looked at him, her large, tear-filled eyes reflecting both hope and despair. "Please bury him somewhere safe. Somewhere no one can hurt him," she said. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of worlds lost and lives shattered. Rylan hesitated. He had no experience with alien burials, no knowledge of their customs or sacred rituals. But when he looked into her eyes, he knew that hesitation was not an option. Whatever he did, it had to be respectful, final, and right. The weight of responsibility pressed on him like a mountain, but he could not turn away. Without a word, Rylan began clearing a space in the bay, dragging old crates and discarded tools aside. The girl followed him silently, watching every move with a mixture of awe and anxious anticipation. Her wings shivered in nervous excitement as she whispered again, "Thank you. Thank you for listening." For the first time since he had arrived at the colony, Rylan felt a sense of purpose beyond machines. This was not about fixing engines or repairing broken hulls. This was about honoring a life, even one so small and fragile, in a universe that often forgot its lost children. As they worked together to prepare a small pit, other colonists started to gather around, whispers turning into murmurs of curiosity and concern. No one had ever seen a human show such patience and care to an alien child, especially in these harsh outer colonies. And as the pit was finally ready, The dragon girl placed her brother gently into it, her claws brushing the metal edges as though to shield him from the world one last time. Rylan stood beside her, silent, waiting for her cue, feeling a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Then, as the first grains of sand fell over the small form, a hush fell over the bay. It was a moment suspended in time, where grief, hope, and human kindness collided. The colony had witnessed something rare, something that would not be forgotten. The girl looked up at Rylan, tears rolling down her scales. You didn't have to, but you did," she whispered, her voice a soft echo in the quiet bay. Rylan simply nodded, unsure of what to say. In that moment, he realized something profound. Even in a galaxy full of danger, loss, and chaos, there was room for compassion, bravery, and small acts of humanity that could shake the stars themselves. And as the colony watched in silence, the tiny dragon girl whispered a final thank you, her voice carrying a secret hope that one day, life would be kinder. But deep in the shadows beyond the bay, unseen eyes watched every move. Not everyone was pleased by the humans' actions, and the quiet of the desert seemed to hold a promise. This small act of mercy might bring both wonder and danger in ways no one could yet imagine. The sun sank behind the jagged mountains of Xiron 7, casting long, eerie shadows across the colony. The desert wind whispered secrets that only the lonely could hear, and the once busy repair bay was now quiet, except for the soft shuffle of scales and the distant clink of tools left untouched. The dragon girl lingered beside the small burial site, her wings half folded, trembling with grief and a strange sense of relief. She had never expected anyone, especially a human, to honor her brother in this way. Yet, even as the first stars began to glow, a cold unease settled over her heart. Rylan, the mechanic, stayed close, watching her carefully. He was not one to read emotions easily, but he sensed a fear that went beyond loss. Something in the way she kept glancing toward the perimeter of the colony suggested danger, something that even the humans hadn't noticed. For days, he had worked among machines and gears, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this feeling. The weight of unseen eyes and unknown threats pressing in from the darkness. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, trying not to startle her. The girl shook her head slightly, her large eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and suspicion. They are still watching," she whispered, her claws gripping the edge of the pit. "Not everyone is happy that my brother is gone." Rylan frowned, unsure whether she meant colonists, aliens, or something else entirely. Before he could ask, a distant sound cut through the still night, a faint scraping, like claws on metal. Both of them froze. The colony, normally alive with distant chatter and engine hums, seemed to hold its breath. The shadows shifted. Somewhere beyond the low walls, a dark silhouette moved, fast and deliberate. Rylan's hand instinctively went to the wrench he had left leaning against a crate. The girl's wings flared slightly, a sign of alertness that made the hairs on the back of Rylan's neck stand on end. "They don't like humans helping us," she said quietly, almost as if explaining something he didn't yet understand. "They think it breaks the balance." Rylan swallowed. He didn't know what balance she meant, but he felt it was dangerous to ignore. "Who are they?" he asked cautiously. The girl's gaze dropped to the ground, and her voice barely rose above a whisper. "The Watchers, old ones. They see everything. They decide who lives and dies." Rylan's mind raced. He had heard old stories of alien factions, secret enforcers, and those who punished kindness as a weakness. But seeing fear like this in the dragon girl's eyes made it real. The desert night felt colder now, the stars above distant and indifferent. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang echoed from the outer gates of the colony. Rylan grabbed the girl, pulling her behind a stack of crates. From their hiding place, they saw a group of dark shapes moving in the shadows, their eyes glinting with a strange, unnatural light. These were no ordinary thieves or scavengers. Their movements were deliberate, controlled, and horrifyingly silent. "Stay close," Rylan whispered. "Whatever they are, we handle it together." The dragon girl nodded, trembling, but not running. There was a strange courage in her, born of loss, that made Rylan feel both awe and worry. The intruders reached the burial site, pausing at the edge. One of them crouched, inspecting the small pit. The dragon girl's claws dug into the floor instinctively, and she let out a low hiss. The intruder recoiled slightly, as if expecting some kind of retaliation, then turned away, speaking in a language Rylan could not understand. Guttural, harsh, commanding. Rylan realized they were negotiating in some alien code, deciding what to do with the burial. He felt a surge of protective anger. These were not just watchers. They were hunters, and his human instincts would not allow them to disturb this sacred space. Without thinking, he stepped out from behind the crates, wrench in hand, his voice steady but firm. Back away. This child's brother rests here. You will not touch him. The shadows froze. The watchers turned, their eyes narrowing, studying him carefully. For a tense moment, it seemed as if the night itself waited for their next move. Then, the dragon girl moved forward, placing a trembling claw on Rylan's arm. No, she said softly. Let me try. My people. They listen to me, sometimes. Rylan hesitated, then stepped back. She raised her head high, her voice growing stronger with each word. She spoke in her own language, harsh and melodic, and the watchers paused, their forms rigid. Slowly, almost reverently, they stepped back, vanishing into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. The night returned to silence. Only the soft wind remained, whispering secrets across the colony. Rylan exhaled, his heart still racing. He looked at the dragon girl, awe and concern mixing on his face. You saved the moment, he said quietly. She shook her head, still tense, still wary. No, it is not over. They will watch again. They always watch. We must be ready. Rylan nodded. For the first time, he understood that this small dragon girl, grieving for her brother, had more courage and power than he could have imagined. And deep in his heart, he knew that the quiet colony on Zyron 7 was about to face challenges that would test both human and alien alike. As the stars glimmered above, and the desert wind whispered secrets of the past, the dragon girl and the human mechanics stared into the night, knowing that this night was only the beginning. Something far larger, far more dangerous was moving closer, and neither of them could afford to turn away. The morning sun barely pierced the dusty skies of Zyron 7, but the colony was already stirring, unaware that danger had crept so close the night before. The dragon girl sat quietly near the small burial pit, her green scales dull under the weak sunlight. Her eyes, wide and alert, never left the horizon. She had been up most of the night, listening for any sound of the watcher's return. Rylan approached her cautiously, carrying a small container of water. Even as he stepped closer, the girl did not look at him, her focus sharp and unwavering. They are not gone, she said softly. They only wait. They are patient and dangerous. Rylan knelt beside her, studying the burial. How do you know this? He asked. The dragon girl's wings shivered slightly. I can feel them. They judge every action. When I asked you to bury him, they did not approve. They will come again to see if we obey their rules. Rylan's heart sank. The idea that a small, grieving girl could draw the attention of alien enforcers was terrifying. He had faced harsh storms, rogue machines, and colony disputes, but nothing prepared him for beings who judged mercy as a crime. Then we must prepare, he said. We can't wait for them to decide what happens next. As they spoke, distant vibrations traveled through the ground. A hum, low and unnatural, grew louder. Rylan instinctively looked around, trying to locate the source. The colony's workers began to notice too, pausing in their morning tasks. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the buildings, and a dark, metallic glimmer appeared on the horizon. The watchers were coming. Not stealthily this time, but openly, their ships hovering low above the colony, their engines silent but terrifyingly ominous. The dragon girl's eyes widened. They have come to inspect. She rose to her feet, claws gripping the edge of the pit protectively. The human mechanic ran to gather any tools he could use as weapons, though he knew none would match the advanced technology of the Watchers. Colonists peeked nervously from behind walls, whispering fears and rumors. The air was thick with tension. The Watchers' ships settled over the colony, and figures emerged, tall, armored beings whose presence alone seemed to distort the light. They moved deliberately, their eyes scanning every corner, every living creature. One of them stopped near the burial pit, raising a hand. Its voice, deep and resonant, echoed in the air. The ritual is incomplete. Justification for intervention is required. Rylan stepped forward, heart pounding. This is her brother, he said firmly. We buried him with respect. Nothing more. The dragon girl's wings flickered nervously, but she did not move. The Watcher studied them, tilting its head, as if weighing their words. Then it spoke again, voice like grinding metal. The human shows audacity. The dragon child shows defiance. Both are noted. Further observation is necessary. Rylan and the girl exchanged a tense glance. Observation. That meant waiting, uncertainty, judgment. It was not just their actions under scrutiny. It was their lives. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. One of the Watcher's subordinates bent down, reaching toward the burial pit. The dragon girl let out a low, warning growl, and before anyone could react, she spread her wings fully and unleashed a powerful gust of wind, sending the Watcher stumbling backward. Rylan shielded his eyes from the sudden force, feeling the raw energy in the air. The other Watchers paused, their stance rigid, clearly surprised by the girl's display. This small creature, orphaned and fragile, had defied them in a moment of courage and grief. Enough! One of the Watchers commanded, its voice sharp and unforgiving. The girl's wings folded reluctantly, but her gaze never wavered. Rylan moved closer, protective but cautious. She's only a child, he said, voice steady. She's not dangerous unless provoked. We buried her brother. That is all. The Watcher studied him, and for a moment, silence ruled the air. Then, as if making a calculated decision, it finally spoke. This human shows loyalty. This dragon shows power beyond her years. Both will remain under observation. Any deviation will be met with correction. Rylan's stomach sank. Observation, correction, words that carried heavy, silent threats. He glanced at the dragon girl, who stood firm, small but unyielding. She whispered to him, voice barely audible, "They will return again, and not just to watch. We must be ready. We cannot allow anyone to take what we care for." Rylan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. It was no longer just a grieving child or a human mechanic. They were now participants in a struggle far beyond the colony, far beyond anything they had imagined. As the Watchers retreated, leaving behind an uneasy silence, the dragon girl knelt by her brother's burial, her claws tracing patterns in the dirt. "They will test us," she said softly, more to herself than to Rylan. "They will try to break us, but I will not let them." Rylan placed a hand gently on her shoulder, unsure whether his touch comforted her or himself. For the first time, he realized that in this quiet desert colony, on this lonely planet, alliances were forming between human courage and alien resilience. And somewhere in the vast, indifferent galaxy, unseen forces had just taken notice, forces that would shape their fates in ways neither of them could yet predict. The sun rose higher, burning off the early mist, but the tension did not fade. Both the dragon girl and the human mechanic understood that this was only the beginning. A storm was coming, one that would test every ounce of their courage, every shred of trust, and every hope they held. And deep in the colony, whispers began to spread. The orphaned dragon girl had shown power, and now the galaxy was watching. Night fell over Xiron 7 like a heavy blanket, and the colony seemed smaller under the cold light of twin moons. The dragon girl stayed near her brother's burial, her wings slightly folded, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon for any movement. Rylan had spent the evening gathering tools and materials, not just for repairs, but for defense. He didn't fully understand the alien powers that the girl seemed to possess, but he knew that when the Watchers returned, they would not come to simply observe. They would test them, push them, and possibly destroy them. The wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic hum, and both of them froze. The shadows beyond the colony stirred as if alive. Rylan motioned for the dragon girl to stay low behind a stack of crates, but she did not move. Instead, she stepped forward, wings slightly extended, ready to defend. The first Watcher emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing, its armor reflecting the faint light. It did not speak. It did not hesitate. The air around it felt heavy, as if gravity itself had increased. Behind it, more Watchers followed silently, their eyes glowing, calculating, and merciless. Rylan's hands tightened around a wrench, but he knew brute force alone could not win this fight. He glanced at the dragon girl, whose small frame seemed fragile but unyielding. Her claws dug into the dirt, and she let out a low hiss, a warning that made even Rylan's stomach churn. Suddenly, the Watcher closest to the burial pit stepped forward, and the air seemed to pulse with energy. Rylan understood instinctively. The confrontation had begun, and there would be no turning back. The dragon girl raised her voice, speaking in her alien language, and a surge of wind erupted from her wings, knocking the nearest Watcher off balance. Sparks flew from the metal armor as the Watcher stumbled, and the others paused, assessing the unexpected force. Rylan, inspired by her bravery, moved alongside her, using his knowledge of the colony's environment to create obstacles. Overturned crates, dangling cables, anything that could slow the Watchers down. The clash was silent but violent, a deadly dance of power versus strategy. One Watcher broke through the debris, reaching toward the pit, its hand glowing with an energy that could tear through metal. The dragon girl reacted instinctively, her claws slashing the air, sending a shockwave that pushed it back. Rylan shouted, "Keep it back! Protect the burial!" He ran forward, using a heavy beam to block another Watcher, buying precious seconds. The colony workers peeked from behind walls, frozen in disbelief. Never had they seen a human and an alien child fight together with such courage and precision. Amid the chaos, the dragon girl's eyes glowed brighter, revealing a hidden power that even Rylan had not fully understood. She lifted herself into the air, wings spread wide, and unleashed a gust that knocked several Watchers to the ground. Rylan watched in awe, realizing that this small orphaned girl had more strength than any machine he had ever repaired, more courage than most adults he knew. But he also understood the danger. Each use of her power drew attention, and the Watchers were patient hunters. They would not forget. One of the Watchers managed to stand, shaking off the impact, its voice resonating in the air. "Defiance is noted, but will be punished." Its gaze locked onto the dragon girl, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Rylan stepped in front of her, chest heaving. "You will not touch her," he said, voice steady despite fear. The Watcher hesitated, then signaled the others. Slowly, deliberately, they retreated, moving back into the shadows with a final glance that promised return. Silence fell over the colony once more, but it was a tense silence, heavy with unspoken threats. The dragon girl landed softly, wings folding against her back. She knelt beside the burial pit, brushing her claws lightly over the earth. Rylan joined her, kneeling beside the small mound of dirt. "We held them off for now," he said quietly. She looked at him, eyes wide but resolute. "They will come again, stronger, smarter, and next time, it may not be just observation. It may be judgment." Rylan nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Tonight had been a test, a warning, and they had survived. But the battle ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand strategy, trust, and the unlikeliest of alliances. The colony returned to uneasy routines, whispers spreading like wildfire. Everyone knew that something extraordinary had happened. The human had defended an alien child, and the orphaned dragon girl had unleashed powers that were both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But beyond the colony, hidden in the vast desert, Dark eyes watched, calculating every move, every gesture. The Watchers had learned much tonight, but the Dragon Girl and Rylan had proven something as well. That even in the harshest galaxy, courage, loyalty, and compassion could stand against fear and tyranny. As the moons rose high, casting pale light over the desert, Rylan and the Dragon Girl sat together near the burial pit, silently planning for what was coming. Neither spoke much, but both understood one undeniable truth. The next confrontation would not be a warning. It would be a battle for survival, and the stakes were higher than either of them had ever imagined. The morning light barely touched the colony, casting long, pale shadows across the cracked metal floors. Rylan and the Dragon Girl had stayed awake most of the night, discussing plans, strategies, and possibilities. Every sound, every movement in the distance, made the Dragon Girl tense, wings flicking nervously, claws digging into the ground. She had never seen the Watchers act so openly before. Rylan, too, felt the weight of their presence. He had spent years repairing machines, never imagining he would now be preparing for a battle with beings who judged life itself. "Why do they care so much about my brother?" she whispered, voice shaking with a mixture of grief and anger. Rylan crouched beside her, carefully choosing his words. "Because he was part of your kind. And maybe because they fear what you represent. Hope, courage, life that refuses to obey their rules." The girl's eyes narrowed. "Hope, courage, can be dangerous," she muttered. "But it is all I have left, and I will not let them take it." Rylan nodded. He understood her determination. The colony had grown accustomed to danger, but never like this, a test not of skill but of morality and strength. The ground trembled faintly, a low vibration that both of them could feel. The Watchers were moving again, silently, beyond the edges of the colony. Rylan grabbed a small scanner and peered through it, tracking their movements. The Watchers were not approaching carelessly. They were methodical, circling, watching patterns, looking for weaknesses. The Dragon Girl's eyes followed their shadows, calculating, understanding things that Rylan could not. "They are planning," she said quietly. "They will strike when we are unprepared, when we least expect it." Rylan took a deep breath, feeling the tension squeeze his chest. "Then we prepare. We use the colony, the terrain, whatever we can. We fight smart." The Dragon Girl's wings shivered slightly. "Smart, yes, but they do not fight like humans. They see everything, feel everything. They can read fear and hesitation. You must not falter." Rylan swallowed, knowing the weight of her words. He had always trusted machines, predictable, logical. But these Watchers were different. Their logic was alien, their purpose hidden, and their patience deadly. As the day passed, the colony workers whispered anxiously, trying to go about their duties, but unable to ignore the tension that gripped them. News of the Dragon Girl's abilities had spread, mixing fear with awe. Some watched from a distance, reluctant to get involved, while others tried to help Rylan set up defenses, barricades, and traps. But nothing they did would be enough if the Watchers attacked without warning. Rylan understood this. Their survival would depend not on brute force, but on unity, courage, and trust in the smallest, most unlikely ally. At nightfall, the Watchers struck. They did not enter with weapons drawn, nor with loud war cries. Instead, their ships hovered silently, dropping small, precise energy probes that lit the colony with eerie glows. Shadows moved along walls and floors, scanning, measuring, calculating. Rylan and the Dragon Girl remained hidden, observing from the edge of the burial pit. She whispered to him, voice steady despite tension. "They are learning testing. If we react poorly, they will attack." Suddenly, a probe hovered near the pit, scanning the ground where her brother rested. The Dragon Girl's eyes flared with determination. With a burst of energy, she sent a gust of wind so strong it forced the probe away, sending sparks scattering across the metal floor. Rylan moved quickly, securing the area while the Watchers analyzed the sudden resistance. The colony shivered with awe. Even small actions from this child could disrupt alien technology designed to control entire populations. One watcher finally spoke, voice resonating in the air like grinding stone. Defiance confirmed. The human-child alliance is irregular. Observation escalates. Rylan felt the weight of their words like a hammer. Observation escalates, it meant preparation for a more aggressive strike. They were not just being watched anymore. They were being marked. The dragon girl's gaze was firm. "We must strike first if they attack," she whispered. "They will not understand mercy. Only strength." Rylan nodded. His mind raced. They were now in a deadly game, where each move could cost lives, and where courage alone might not be enough. The night grew darker, the air tense with anticipation. Both human and dragon child knew one truth. The Watcher's plan was far from revealed, and their patience meant danger approaching silently. The burial of a small brother had set forces in motion that neither had foreseen. And somewhere, beyond the colony, the Watchers whispered among themselves, preparing strategies for a confrontation that could shake the desert, the colony, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Rylan looked at the dragon girl, her small wings folded, eyes sharp, and realized that together, they were stronger than any machine, any weapon, any fear. "We face them," he said quietly. She nodded, determination blazing. "We face them, and we will not fall." The desert wind carried their resolve across the colony, a quiet defiance that promised hope, courage, and a battle that neither side would forget. The colony was restless under the twin moons of Xiron 7, every shadow lengthening into a possible threat. The dragon girl crouched near her brother's burial pit, her wings slightly unfurled, muscles tense, eyes scanning the darkness. Rylan moved beside her, carrying a collection of tools and improvised weapons. Neither spoke much. Both were aware that the quiet was deceptive. The Watchers did not rush. They never did. Their patience made them far more dangerous than any storm or machine the colony had ever faced. The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of energy that immediately set both human and dragon on edge. Then it began. At first, it was subtle. A flicker of lights along the colony perimeter, a shadow darting unnaturally across the metal roofs. Then, with sudden precision, energy beams cut through the air, narrowly missing the makeshift barricades Rylan had placed. The Watchers had arrived, and this time they were not observing. They were attacking. The dragon girl hissed, wings spreading fully, sending a gust of wind so strong that one beam was deflected, sparking against a metal wall. Rylan ducked behind a crate, heart pounding, mind racing. He had faced mechanical failures and rogue drones, but this was an enemy with patience, intelligence, and lethal power. The Watchers moved in formations, silent and precise, their eyes glowing as they scanned the colony for weaknesses. Rylan grabbed a heavy beam, swinging it to block a probing strike, while the dragon girl unleashed bursts of energy from her wings, knocking several Watchers backward. Sparks flew, metal screeched, and the desert wind carried the scent of burning energy. Colonists peeked from behind walls, frozen between fear and awe. Never had they witnessed such a display of raw courage, especially from a small dragon child. "Rylan!" The dragon girl shouted over the roar of energy, her voice sharp, commanding. "We must protect the pit. Whatever they want, they will not take him." He nodded, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Together, they formed an unspoken alliance, the human defending with strategy and tools, the dragon girl unleashing powers that seemed impossible for someone so small. Each strike, each gust of wind, pushed the Watchers back temporarily, but Rylan knew it was only a matter of time. They were testing, probing, learning, and learning meant they would come stronger. Suddenly, one Watcher lunged directly at the burial pit, its energy weapon aimed at the ground. The dragon girl reacted instinctively, slashing the air with her claws, generating a shockwave that stopped it in its tracks. Rylan surged forward, using a heavy pipe to knock it aside. For a brief moment, the Watcher faltered, confusion flashing in its glowing eyes. But it recovered, and its companions closed in from all sides. The colony became a battlefield, metal clashing against alien armor, wind and energy colliding in bursts that lit the night like lightning storms. Ryland's mind raced. "We can't hold them forever," he shouted. The dragon girl's eyes glowed fiercely. "We don't have to. We only need to survive long enough for them to underestimate us." She leapt into the air, wings beating against the desert wind, and with a powerful sweep, created a barrier of energy that forced the watchers to step back. Sparks scattered across the ground, and the sound of metal striking metal echoed through the colony. Ryland realized that her courage and power were more than just defense. They were a declaration that they would not bow to fear. The leader of the Watchers advanced, its form towering above the others. Its glowing eyes locked on the dragon girl, voice resonating like grinding stone. "Defiance has limits. Compliance is required." The dragon girl's wings flicked, eyes blazing. "You will not touch him," she said in a low, firm voice, referring to her brother's burial. Ryland moved closer to her, hands raised in support. In that instant, something shifted. The energy in the desert seemed to respond to her determination. The air vibrated with power, wind whipping in spirals, forcing the watchers backward. For a moment, even Ryland felt a strange surge of hope. That courage, even from the smallest, most vulnerable, could turn the tide. Finally, after what felt like hours, the watchers paused. The leader spoke once more, voice low and deliberate. "This battle is not over. Observation continues. Defiance noted. Any future resistance will be met with decisive force." Slowly, the watchers retreated, their ships rising silently into the sky, leaving the colony battered, shaken, but still standing. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and scorched metal. The dragon girl collapsed to the ground near the pit, breathing heavily. Ryland knelt beside her, placing a hand on her scaled shoulder. "We did it, for now," he said quietly. She looked at him, exhaustion in her eyes, but also determination. "Yes, for now. But they will return stronger. We must be ready. They are patient, and we cannot falter." Ryland nodded, understanding that this was more than survival. It was preparation for something larger, a war of courage against oppression, a struggle that would test everything they had and everything they were willing to fight for. The colony slowly resumed its uneasy quiet, colonists whispering in awe about the courage of the dragon girl and the human who had stood beside her. Yet beyond the horizon, hidden in the desert's shadows, the watchers observed, silent and calculating. They had learned much tonight, but the human and the orphan dragon girl had also proven something crucial. Even in a galaxy ruled by fear, courage, loyalty, and unity could defy the strongest, the most relentless enemies. And as the twin moons rose high over Xiron 7, both Ryland and the dragon girl knew that the ultimate test was yet to come. The colony was silent under the first light of dawn, the desert air heavy with tension. The twin moons had faded, leaving the pale glow of Xiron 7's sun creeping over jagged rocks. Ryland and the dragon girl stood near the burial pit, every muscle tense, every sense alert. They knew the watchers would return. This time it would not be a test. It would be decisive. The quiet moments of the night had been preparation. Moments to breathe, to plan, to gather courage. And both knew that their courage, small as it seemed, would decide the fate of more than just the colony. The distant hum began again, low at first, then growing, vibrating through the metal floors and into their bones. The watchers arrived silently, hovering in perfect formation. Their eyes glowed ominously, scanning, calculating, waiting for the right moment. Ryland tightened his grip on a heavy beam, while the dragon girl crouched beside him, wings slightly unfurled. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else. "This ends today, one way or another." Ryland nodded, understanding the truth in her words. They could no longer run. There would be no mercy from the watchers, and hesitation could mean death. Then the assault began. Energy beams shot from the hovering ships, cutting across the colony with precision. Ryland ducked behind a crate, yelling instructions to the few colonists who had gathered. "Stay low. Use the cover. Protect the pit." The dragon girl launched into the air, wings flaring, unleashing a tempest of wind and energy. Sparks flew as beams of light collided with her power, scattering watchers and machines alike. Her small form moved with grace and precision, a whirlwind of courage that seemed impossible for someone so young, so fragile. The watchers advanced, relentless, their strategy clear. They aimed not just to attack, but to intimidate, to break the dragon girl's spirit. But she refused to falter. Her eyes glowed brighter, her claws slicing the air, generating bursts of energy that sent watchers tumbling. Rylan moved alongside her, improvising traps, using machinery and debris to slow the attackers. They fought together, a human and a child dragon, united by grief, courage, and unspoken trust. The colony watched in awe, whispers of disbelief spreading among the survivors. The leader of the Watchers advanced directly toward the burial pit, its glowing eyes focused on the dragon girl. "Defiance will end," it said, voice resonating like grinding stone. She lifted herself into the air, wings extended fully, and shouted in her own language. A surge of power erupted from her, shaking the ground and forcing the Watchers backward. Rylan took the moment to move, reinforcing the barriers around the pit, ensuring the safety of her brother's resting place. Even the Watchers, patient and calculating, faltered in the face of her determination. The battle raged, energy and wind colliding in violent harmony, but slowly, the tide turned. The Watchers, impressed and wary of the girl's powers, began to retreat. Their formations broke, and one by one, they lifted into the sky, vanishing over the horizon. Silence fell over the colony, broken only by the wind and the heavy breaths of those who had survived. The dragon girl descended, wings folding against her back, exhausted but triumphant. Rylan approached, placing a hand on her scaled shoulder. "We did it, we survived," he said softly. She nodded, tears glimmering in her large eyes. "Yes, for now. But we proved something. We are not afraid. We are not weak." The colony slowly emerged from hiding, eyes wide with wonder. Murmurs of astonishment spread through the metal corridors. The human and the dragon child had faced impossible odds and prevailed. Colonists came closer, offering help, congratulations, and quiet admiration. The dragon girl looked at Rylan, gratitude shining through her fatigue. "You stayed with me," she said simply. Rylan smiled faintly. "You didn't need me to stay. You had the courage all along. I just helped." For the first time since the loss of her brother, the dragon girl felt a flicker of hope, a warmth in her heart that had been absent for so long. The desert was still harsh, the galaxy indifferent, but together, they had proven that courage, loyalty, and compassion could withstand even the greatest threats. And as the sun rose higher over Zyron 7, the dragon girl whispered a quiet promise to her brother. "You will always be safe, always remembered." Rylan and the dragon girl stood together at the edge of the burial pit, watching the colony return to life. The danger had passed, but their bond had grown stronger. In a galaxy filled with fear, conflict, and uncertainty, they had found strength, hope, and friendship. And somewhere in the distance, far beyond the colony, the Watchers observed once more, but this time with respect. They had learned a lesson. Even the smallest, most unlikely beings could challenge the strongest forces in the galaxy. As the colony settled, Rylan turned to the audience of survivors, and to the viewers of this story, if they were watching, and said quietly, "No matter how dark the night, courage and kindness can shine brighter than any enemy. Stand by those you care for, and never give up, even when the odds seem impossible." The dragon girl nodded, a small smile lighting her face, her wings folding peacefully. The story of her brother, the courage of a child, and the loyalty of a human would be remembered, not just in the colony, but across the galaxy. And with that, a new chapter began, one of hope, unity, and the promise that even in a vast, indifferent universe, small acts of bravery could change everything. The end.